Voice of San Diego podcasts are sponsored by the Bob Nelson Charitable Fund, honoring the San Diego Harbor Police Foundation.
Hey, we are hosting a happy hour next week. That's an event for our members. It's happening Wednesday night, 5:30 p.m. That's June 24th, 5:30 p.m. It's a virtual event. We've been putting these things on for our members. We'll talk about our reporting and some of the biggest things we've been covering in recent weeks. This Wednesday, we're going to talk to Adriana Heldis, Lisa Halverstad, and Will Huntsberry. We're going to talk about schools opening back up. We're going to talk about what the protests look like, and we're going to talk about the future of homelessness and MTS. If you're not a member yet, you can get your ticket for the event right now. Just go to VOSD.org/events. And if you sign up as a member, you'll get access to the rest of our events this year too. Again, that's VOSD.org/events. Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast in partnership with News Radio 600 Kogo. I am Scott Lewis, the CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice of San Diego. I'm joined, as always, assistant editor Andrew Keats. Hello, Andy.
What's up, Scotty?
Managing editor Sarah Libby. Hello.
Hello.
Coming up on the show today, we finally have some updates on what schools will do this fall, but they brought up more questions. San Diego Unified School District unveiled its plan this week. We'll break it down and talk about what they said. Andy's going to break down also the criminal justice angles in the race for San Diego mayor, a race that is suddenly different. It's really just a few months away, and the political landscape has shifted a lot. And we have a news story this week about how skipping a $2.50 ticket on the trolley system or bus system can devastate poor families in San Diego. Reporter Lisa Halverstad is going to join us show and talk about what she found there. But first, there will be schools. They came out with a plan for San Diego Unified. There are 42 school districts in San Diego. The biggest, of course, is San Diego Unified, covers most of the city of San Diego. They're going to have regular schools 5 days a week, and they're going to have an online option. We paid attention to the regular school, of course, with a ton of modifications, including as per the governor's orders now, too, going to wear masks. They're going to, I guess, just require masks. Not sure what the enforcement will be on that. I asked our incoming freshman in the House, Lexi Lewis, what she thought if the kids would err on the side of being cool with the mask, or would being cool be to not have the mask. And she said only the good kids would probably want to wear the mask. And so I said, oh, you then too, right? Because you're part of them. You wouldn't do that. And I don't know. What do you guys, would the cool kids in your high school wear the masks or not wear the masks?
Have you guys seen the remake of 21 Jump Street?
Yes.
No.
It's awesome. And
Yeah,
I see
it's
where
so
you're
good.
going with this. It's perfect.
Yeah. There's like a scene where Channing Tatum like rolls into the high school doing all the things that he did in high school to be cool. So he rolls up in like a muscle car.
What's that thing get, 10 miles to the gallon?
No, try like 7.
And he starts insulting kids by calling them gay. And all of the cool kids in the school are like, where is your Prius? Also, why would you say that?
Hey, what the hell? Are you serious?
I'll turn that gay-ass music off.
You punch me because I'm gay?
What? No,
And
come
like
on.
it's suddenly become cool to be like hyper aware of some of these issues. So I think the wishful thinking version is that like it will be cool to have a mask.
Yeah.
When I was in elementary school, the state of Maryland passed a requirement that everyone under 16, I believe, wear a bicycle helmet. And that quickly became, in Bowman Bridge Elementary School, a real dividing line on whether you were cool or not.
Yeah.
And one day I was riding my bike without a helmet, and I was pulled over by a police officer and given a ticket and driven home by a police officer when I was like, 10 years old or something.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wore a helmet from then on. I assume that norm has taken over by now.
So what you're saying is that I probably convening our own product team to try to do some sort of viral video that would convince kids it's cool, maybe should hold off on that effort. Not likely to succeed.
Should probably hold off on any effort to make a viral video.
Yeah, or just a PSA. We don't need to do those either.
The masks are certainly a dividing line. I think it'll be really interesting to see how they pull these off. Okay, so that's the modification. That and a couple other things. They're going to try to put partitions up inside classrooms because it's just physically impossible to put that few of kids into the classrooms. They need to pack more kids in, so they think the only thing they can do is actually put partitions in, which will be fascinating to watch. And it sounds like, so the state punted the guidelines basically down to the counties. The counties punted the guidelines to the individual school districts. And now it seems like the individual school districts are punting them down to the literal schools to try to figure out how to implement all these points. So there's that. The San Diego Unified also then said they're going to launch an online-only curriculum for people who want to stay home or keep their kids home. And they were using some classic sort of buzzwords in education that have really been trending with like charter schools, like customized education, customized software, personal learning things. So that's kind of a fascinating development as they adopt that. They're trying to keep kids in the system. But then there came the real hammer of the discussion. So this was Tuesday afternoon. San Diego Unified's going through its plan, talking about masks, talking about temperature screening before the kids walk in, and separation. And then Superintendent Sydney Martin says this about how she needs more money from not just the state, which she seems like she's more or less okay with, but from the federal government and the U.S. Senate, Mitch McConnell's U.S. Senate. Let's hear it.
The bottom line is this. The COVID emergency costs are only partially funded through the legislature's budget. We believe the current funding approved by the state legislature only takes us through half the year. Funding for the full year will depend on the passage of the HEROES Act and more federal relief. This is the reality.
So just to be clear, what she's talking about is the HEROES Act that was passed by the U.S. House of Representatives, dominated by Democrats, includes massive investments in helping people get through this. And it passed, but now it's on to the U.S. Senate. We don't know when that might be taken up.
But she's also sort of counting on it as a given that the state budget that passed this week is going to be the state budget, and there's no indication right now that that's true. They had to pass a budget on Monday because of a deadline, but they still haven't come to an agreement with the governor, who proposed much steeper cuts. And so, they're not just counting on Mitch McConnell, right, which is its own heavy lift, but things with the state could turn out differently as well.
It was a fascinating discussion there. So if we had Hero of the Week, I would give Hero of the Week to Zachary Patterson, who was at he's the student member of the school board, the student that gets to sit up there. And usually, isn't much of a factor, but he was wielding it, man. He was up there making some points. I loved listening to him. And he breaks in, and they're about to cut to something else. He's like, hey, I want to talk. And he says, how much certainty can you give us that this is going to happen? Because I'm having a real hard time thinking that this is going to work, or being able to assure my friends and everybody that we can go back to school if it could suddenly change in the middle of the year. What do you know about how certain that we're going to be able to get this money from the government, from the federal government is? And when would that actually happen? Would it shut off in January, all that stuff? So then it pans to Richard Barrera on the school board, and he's like, you're doing a great job, Zachary.
Oh, man. That is...
He's like, you and your colleagues have been lobbying, and he starts to lay out how they've been basically trying to connect with school districts in battleground states where senators are facing a tough reelection, Colorado, Arizona, these places. And so they're trying to get those school districts to pressure those senators, many of whom are embattled sort of Republican senators, to kind of push this forward. And so Barrera's like, so if that works out, we're going to make this happen. You're doing a great job on that. And nothing else about like how certain it is. But I got to tell Zachary and everybody, it doesn't seem that certain. It seems like something might happen, that there might be some sort of relief bill, but it seems like a big, big gamble. I don't know how it's going to pull off.
That's such a classic move. I think every journalist has experienced when they ask a tough question and they're met with, that is a great question, and like not really anything else.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just worth putting a point on the fact that as long as they're asking for more money, it's important to think of that as a budget negotiation.
Yeah.
And maybe it is the case that without extra money, the school districts really will be forced to close mid-year. Maybe it previously really was the case that without a different state budget, that school districts couldn't open at all. But it might also be the case that the school districts have recognized that at this moment they have quite a bit of leverage, and their leverage relies on selling the idea that opening for physical school is in doubt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think obviously that's an interesting point. I think another thing that sort of belied this bluff in a way was when Richard Barrera, following up on that answer to the question, said, I think we'll know by the end of July. They're going to try to pass this through the Senate. They're going to make some moves. And so if by the end of July they haven't approved what he thinks they need or what Cindy Martin thinks they need, then they don't have to wait till halfway through the year. They would be able to make the decision right now if they were to suddenly say, we're not literally going to open schools. So they almost like called their own bluff in a way then.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely say for sure, though, that if at that point, if in July the HEROES Act doesn't pass and they miraculously find some other funding source or arrangement that allows them to stay open for a full year, it would be the first time that a government agency ever said something would or wouldn't happen depending on a budget decision.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be totally new.
I got it. Yeah, so just quite another moment in this weird reality we're in. Schools coming back, a lot of modifications. They're going to do temperature checks to get into the buildings. That'll be really interesting to watch as well. And teachers, I guess, can stay home if they want to keep, and they can work on this online platform instead. They want 20 to 30% more funds than they have this year, and that was in addition to this sort of getting what they got from the state government, if that holds. And yet they might also see a 15% enrollment drop. So it could be just really, again, just a historic moment for public education. One of the things that happened this week is the San Diego Democratic Party passed a resolution sort of asking or demanding that its people who it endorses not accept funds from the Police Officers Association or from other unions that represent police officers or sheriffs. And one of the people who got the endorsement of the Police Officers Association was Todd Gloria. He's running for mayor. He's their choice as the Democratic Party for mayor. And so you have been looking, Andy, into some of these questions about the mayor's race and what some of these criminal justice issues may bring to that race. But first of all, can you help me understand what the Democratic Party actually decided? They say like, we're going to prohibit you from sharing an endorsement of ours and the Police Officers Association, or was it a little more messy than that?
I think the way to look at it is that they wanted to make this statement against supporting, or against seeking endorsements from police unions, but there was some wariness around like changing up the rules mid-cycle. So candidates who are on the November ballot have been running for office for at least 18 months or so, and so some of them long ago secured the endorsements of police unions, and I guess they didn't want to say that those candidates had to go back and rescind that support today, or at least not demand it. So they said, if you already have support in this cycle, that you're encouraged to donate any funds you've received from those sources to nonprofit groups that are doing racial justice work. Now, I do think that last part is the sort of attempt to square the circle for this cycle comes up a little short, because the political value of a police union endorsement is not from, especially in the city of San Diego, where you can only get endorsements from actual people. You can't get endorsements into your candidate account from...
You mean donations?
Yeah, donations. You can't get donations from unions or corporations. You have to get them from actual people. So the value of a police union endorsement is not from individuals giving Todd Gloria or Barbara Bree, individual members of that organization donating to their campaigns. The value is from those unions or corporations forming independent expenditure political action committees to spend independently on their behalf. And it is perfectly true that candidates are legally barred from telling those groups what they should do. So if you have a police union endorsement, you could donate whatever amount you receive from leaders of that union. But what's going to matter in terms of the outcome of the election is whether that union decides to send out mailers or put up TV ads on your behalf. And you don't have any say in that.
Yeah. Well, so Barbara Bree, Todd Gloria's rival, who's running for that mayoral seat as well, she has tried to make criminal justice an issue in the race. She's attacked him for not supporting Assemblywoman Shirley Weber's bill that would have put a clearer definition into state law about when a police officer's crossed the line when he's used lethal force. She said, Barbara Bree has said that he came in late and after that bill was watered down. So you explored that issue and more with her, and I gather it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, we'll throw it to that clip in a second. This was a allegation that was made for the first time back in December, actually, when Shirley Weber was named the Union Tribune's San Diegan of the Year based on the passage of this bill. So the bill initially proposed, in the end, it proposed changing the standard of use of force from when it was deemed reasonable for an officer to when it was deemed necessary. And the final version of the bill did remove a specific definition of what constitutes necessary and a requirement that an officer expend all non-lethal uses of force before reverting to a lethal use of force. So there was a change made to the bill. That's what Barbara Bree is referring to when she calls it watered down. But it did. I wanted to follow up with Shirley Weber about the central allegation that Todd Gloria only supported it after that change was made, and that Barbara Bree supported it prior to that, because it sort of turned on a technicality that the city council, when they voted, they held a non-binding resolution vote in support of the measure, and that did occur first, but that was because it just hadn't come up for a vote in the assembly yet. And so I asked Shirley Weber if it was true that when Barbara Bree made that vote, that Todd Gloria had not yet supported the measure, as Bree alleged. And this is what Assemblywoman Weber said.
From day one, Todd Gloria was on this bill. I didn't have to twist his arm. I didn't have to say anything crazy. He was on the bill. He was supportive. And folks thought, oh, you really probably shouldn't, because, the police are going to be mad, and they were mad at the time with 931, and they was mad at 392 when we started. So he was not going to gain any friends by this, and he was on the bill. He was supported. I knew he was going to vote for this bill, whether it's 931 or 392. Todd was on the bill, period.
So that's pretty straightforward, pretty unequivocal. The other question was about Barbara Bree's support for the bill. And what role Shirley Weber may have had in securing that support. And this is what she had to say about that.
And I talked to Barbara Bree, and she was wibble wobble. Okay? She was not like, oh, this is a great idea. Oh, I haven't had a chance to read down the word. Oh, that kind of stuff. Everybody tells you that to get some time to figure out what they're going to do. So she was not like, yes, this is something I want to do. This is something great, so forth and so on. And I knew that Barbara had gotten support in the African-American community for her mayorship. Mm-hmm. And I went to them. I won't tell you that I went directly to them and said, listen, this bill is coming up next week, and these are folks who are truly supportive of 392. I said, I need you to talk to Barbara to make sure she votes for it, because she's having some hesitation. And I don't know what they said to her, but they called me back and said, okay, we'll handle this. And they did. Now, was she from the beginning overwhelmingly enthusiastic? No. Did I know I had her support from the beginning? No. She supported it in the end? Yes. Did she vote for it before Todd? Yes, but that doesn't make her a supporter before because of the circumstances of how this occurred, and we had not taken it to the floor.
So,
for the vote.
again, fairly unequivocal, I'd say.
What's so weird to me about this is it seems like a weird gamble from Barbara Bree, not to bring another person into this, contention that she's making who could easily refute what she's saying, but to bring in someone who perhaps more than any other person in San Diego is known for speaking truth regardless of consequence. And it's just like she refuted her so clearly and so unequivocally. Like, why make those claims?
Yeah, the only thing I can guess is that while Shirley Weber has been unendingly willing to speak her mind on fraught policy issues, she tends not to delve into political disputes much at all. That's not really something she.
I
seems
guess
to care
so,
about.
but I just think making a bet on Shirley Weber holding her tongue is not a great bet.
Yeah.
Agree. And but that said, it was up until I finally got her on the phone that Shirley seemed willing to allow this allegation to stand. Now it is pretty straightforward now, though, I would say.
Sure. There's also just kind of like the broader weirdness of like saying you actually supported an assembly bill more when you're not in the assembly and your opponent is.
Right. And praising the support of that bill while sort of like negging it and suggesting
also saying it's bad.
Also saying that it's been watered down. Yeah.
Now Barbara
It's
Bree,
all very strange.
Barbara Bree does have some support as Shirley Weber implied, in the Black community and among criminal justice reformers. What other things do the two candidates break down on?
Well, I think on the big picture of like their vision for what the city should do going forward, the distinctions are actually pretty small. They both have been quite willing to say that they don't support the defund movement. Both in conversations said that they're willing to take a fresh look at all of the things that the police department is tasked with doing, which may mean that they no longer are involved in enforcement for homelessness or mental health, or truancy is something Barbara Bree mentioned, and that might address so-called mission creep. So there's some overlap there, and then they both are in favor of some of these reforms for standards and practices and increased training, which are much more the types of reforms in the criminal justice and policing world that we've been discussing prior to the last 2 weeks, when suddenly this movement to defund the police gained so much momentum. I will say though that Barbara Bree is certainly credited by supporters of the new the movement to set up a new oversight body over police, an independent review board that would have subpoena power. The proponents of that measure very strongly say that Barbara Bree has been with them from the very beginning, and that when they brought a similar measure forward in 2016, Todd Gloria took it, gutted it, and changed it into a much weaker version of that measure. A instance that Andrea St. Julian from the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association referred to as the first instance of betrayal that those advocates faced when they tried to get this measure through the city council.
Yeah, and I mean, you also mentioned that Todd long ago secured the police union endorsement, and I think that's certainly something that Barbara Bree could raise in these current circumstances and say, well, maybe there's a reason I didn't get it, and maybe that's not a great endorsement to have.
She does, and she says if you look at the most significant reform efforts in Camden or previously, or what was going on in Minneapolis right now, that the union has been an impediment to change. And then she refers back to the independent review board and AB 392 as instances where the police unions did exert their influence, and says that Todd Gloria's endorsement from that group indicates that he will have trouble pursuing real change.
Let's finish this on one point. There is that ballot measure going forward to create a different oversight board for the police misconduct investigations. It would have subpoena power, which has been a big point, and it would have its own independent lawyer. Is that going forward then? Like we all thought, the mayor endorsed it in a sort of somewhat unexpected move a couple weeks ago, and we heard today that it was going forward, but maybe not right away?
Yeah, so there was a change made to the measure, but not on any of the three big issues that proponents are most excited about. That's that it can conduct independent investigations, that it has subpoena power, and that it has its own independent legal counsel. It still has all of those three things. The new measure does include an appeal process for officers who are found by the board to have committed misconduct. So there's that. Now, it was supposed to be placed on the ballot at a city council meeting next week. My understanding is that won't be possible, specifically because the city clerk has not called the election yet. And so procedurally, they can't place a measure on the ballot that doesn't technically, for an election that doesn't technically exist yet. And so the city council hearing next week will sort of be a precursor to an eventual other city council discussion that will actually have to put it on the ballot. So there's that.
Got it. All right. Thanks, Andy.
All right. See you guys. Good timing.
We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, we'll talk with reporter Lisa Halverstadt about her story this week. It was a good one. Stay with us.
Hey y'all, I'm Will Huntsberry. I'm an education reporter and one of the hosts of a show called Good Schools for All. It's a podcast all about schools, how they work and how they don't. This season we'll bring you stories about struggling schools, preschools, and an unprecedented scam that cost California tens of millions of dollars. Catch the new season now, wherever you listen to podcasts.
In a single week last June, just 1 week, officers for the Metropolitan Transit System, that's the public transit service for San Diego, the city of San Diego, and South Bay and East County, they wrote nearly 1,500 citations for evading fares. That's for people who did not pay the $2.50 ticket to ride a trolley or a bus. Voice San Diego reporter Lisa Halverstadt decided to look into what happened with all of those people and all those tickets, and she found that 86% of those were still unpaid and unresolved, and virtually all of those unpaid tickets had been referred to debt collectors, and the lives of those people who had that debt have been changed and burdened ever since. Lisa joins now to talk about her story and talk about some updates that happened there. First of all, Lisa, how did you first get this idea to pull 1 week from June last year?
So I was sitting in a meeting late last year where MTS officials were literally saying that despite the fact that they have dramatically increased their enforcement, literally going from about 15,000 or so tickets in 2015 to last year giving out more than 66,000 tickets in 1 year, they couldn't say what was happening after they wrote those tickets. How were those tickets impacting the people that got them? And so I sat in the audience there and I thought, man, somebody should look into that. And then I thought, wait, I could do that. I could check out what's happening. And so began on this really involved process to be matching up MTS ticket information with court databases.
Mm-hmm. And so you found one man in particular we highlighted, but a bunch of others. People were getting multiple tickets. And what happens to a ticket if they don't pay it right away? First of all, how much is a ticket if you don't pay your fare?
Well, to start, the ticket is under $100 per the MTS ordinance. But what happens, I think is really important for folks to understand, is once something goes to court, a lot of costs are tacked on. So once one of these tickets goes to court, it's usually about $193.
So if you have a $75 ticket from not paying your fare, you don't pay it, it gets referred to court, it becomes a what?
Well, so to back up, what I would say is it basically, the way that the MTS system works now, you get a ticket and it is basically a $193 ticket because all the cases are going to court. They're sent over to the Superior Court. And if a ticket is not paid after a certain period of time and someone doesn't show up in court to resolve it, a $315 fine is added on to that by the court. It's called a civil assessment. And so what I saw in looking up these tickets is that so many people ended up with tickets. 86% of people ended up with tickets that were about $500 for one instance of not paying the fare because they had failed to show up and resolve the ticket.
So obviously, being sent to a debt collector can have like tremendous impact on your life and ramifications on a lot of the decisions you make. What were some of the most surprising things you found from people that you talked to about ways that this had haunted them?
So what shocked me, because I'd sort of heard anecdotes for a long time about how these tickets affected people. But what shocked me is that if something is sent to collections and after a certain period of time, the collections agency can't track you down and get you to pay, tickets can be sent to the state franchise tax board and they can actually start pulling money out of your paycheck. And what's interesting about this for a lot of these folks that get these tickets is when they're kind of getting in a place of their life where they're able to start trying to resolve some of these tickets. Maybe they're not facing the same financial challenges. Maybe they're a homeless person who's starting to, be able to access services. Then when they have a job, boom, all of a sudden, wages start getting pulled. Right as they're starting to kind of, get on the right track and feel good about where things are headed. What I also found is that this really can mess up your credit big time if you have these civil assessments on your record. People, including this gentleman that I had spoken to, Dante, he said that he had trouble purchasing a car, even though he'd saved up money to do that. And he also said that he has tried to get into multiple apartments, and when landlords go and check his credit, suddenly he's not a good candidate, and he blames that on trolley tickets.
Now, MTS is overseen by a board of directors, and many of the members of the board are city council members, some of the most progressive, or liberal people in San Diego politics. And yet, the enforcement at MTS has been, as you said, over the last couple of years, rather intense, disproportionate compared to other communities. What did you find when you looked at how much we deploy officers to look for fare evaders here in San Diego compared to other cities across the country?
So what I've found is that MTS enforcement far outpaces enforcement in most other agencies, including a lot of agencies that are a lot bigger. One thing that MTS often likes to point out about this is MTS has a non-gated system, which means that unlike BART, where you need to go through a gate, they don't have gates. And so they believe that it's really important to have some mechanism for folks to know that they're checking fare, and that there are consequences for just hopping on the trolley. However, their focus on this far outpaces any other agency that I've seen.
Including agencies that have the same system with no gates and even bigger ridership, right?
Yes.
And we weren't even seeing with that, you'd think, well, maybe we had a better percentage of fare payers versus fare evaders. And it didn't even pan out that way, right? There was other systems that had better fare paying rates, but had less enforcement.
What I can tell you is that MTS, since it started this process, has not seen a major drop in its fare evasion rates. And in fact, as I talk to experts and other agencies, when I would tell them that MTS has about a 3% evasion rate, everyone was like, wow, that's great. So, certainly it comes at a cost when people don't pay the fare, but MTS is doing pretty well on this front right now.
Got it. Well, they met Thursday morning. You had to leave our staff meeting to go and watch what they did. What did they decide? They were already discussing fare evasion and enforcement, and I gather they made some changes.
Yeah, so they were already, as you said, were planning to vote on a pilot program, a 1-year pilot, to try to provide some diversion for people who get fare evasion tickets. But what they did today was they kind of ramped up what they were already planning to do. So now folks will be able to pay a reduced fine of just $25 if they handle that citation within 120 days. They'll also get options to do community service. One of the new things that came up today as well is that there was direction that if somebody isn't, if an officer encounters somebody who is evading the fare or can't show that they paid for their ticket, they can immediately deboard the trolley to go buy one. And then the even bigger news was that the board directed MTS staff to develop a plan to establish a civil citation process, which would totally take the courts out of the mix. We don't really know how long that will take, when the next update might be, but this is significant because the courts are really where a lot of the fees and burdens get tacked on now.
How much of the MTS budget is fares? I think a lot of people have never quite understood this, that MTS gets money from the government or from various sources, but a big part of it really is fares. There were some people saying maybe we shouldn't charge at all, but that would have to come with some major reforms to how they operate.
So MTS gets about a third of its budget from fares right now. And prior to COVID, they were anticipating that they would get about $97 million this year from fares. One thing that MTS has historically said is that a lot of other agencies are subsidized more from other entities. And so they're more reliant on fare revenue than agencies like the LA Metro, for example. And so, even just I spoke with CEO Sharon Cooney earlier this week, and she was just pointing out that this creates challenges for them. And, they really would have to look at more revenue coming in if they were to seriously consider trying to significantly reduce fares, or even have a program for low-income folks who might qualify for a reduced fare under that sort of program.
Yeah. Well, Lisa Halberstadt's piece is on voiceofsandiego.org right now. Thanks for digging in as you did.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, we are hosting a happy hour next week. That's an event for our members. It's happening Wednesday night, 5:30 p.m. That's June 24th, 5:30 p.m. It's a virtual event. We've been putting these things on for our members. We'll talk about our reporting and some of the biggest things we've been covering in recent weeks. This Wednesday, we're going to talk to Adriana Heldis, Lisa Halberstadt, who you just heard, and Will Huntsberry. We're going to talk about schools opening back up. We're going to talk about what the protests look like, and we're going to talk about the future of homelessness and MTS. If you're not a member yet, you can get your ticket for the event right now. Just go to VOSD.org/events. And if you sign up as a member, you'll get access to the rest of our events this year too. Again, that's VOSD.org/events. Thanks. Did you hear that, Sarah?
Good job reading, Scott.
Okay.
Proud of you, buddy.
Thank you, Sarah. You give me strength. Thanks for listening to the Voice of San Diego podcast. It's the most popular public affairs podcast in San Diego. To keep up with everything we're doing at Voice of San Diego and the biggest news of the region, sign up for the Morning Report. That's our most popular product. Our newsletter comes out every morning, Monday through Friday. You can get it right now at VOSD.org/morning. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and Editor-in-Chief. Andrew Keats is Assistant Editor. Sarah Libby's Managing Editor. This show was produced by Nate John. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.